Sort of
I, I always like to frame it too as like if you have a microdose capsule in your left hand, an SSRI or a Xanax or a benzo in your right hand, and you're replacing the SSRI or benzo with the microdose, and you're not going to do any of those behavioral exercises that you mentioned, or make it a dedication or a practice, or carving out 1/4 of the year or a whole year is really not that much. Cut down on the Netflix, cut down on going out to social events you don't want to go out to anyway, and combine the behavioral exercises of journaling and meditation and breath work and walking in nature and quiet contemplation with the microdose. You're going to get an exponential amount of results from that, instead of falling into that conditioning that we all have, is that we can just take a magic pill and all our problems and ailments and disease just goes away. So definitely want to, boldface that, neon color it, that it's not a magic pill, it's not a panacea, but it can really help synergize and amplify any of those other behavioral practices. And from a scientific perspective, Dr. Andrew Huberman, I'm sure a lot of you listen to him, he talks a lot about ADHD and Adderall and Ritalin and focus. And one thing he says is that it's an illusion to think that we can take something to turn something on and off in our brain at will. We have to combine these behavioral exercises with that. And that's the work. You hear people say that the work, that's the real work. But just 5-10 minutes a day of journaling, 5-10 minutes of breath work, 30 minutes walking in nature without your phone. These are all just very simple practices. And then tracking the frequency and consistency, and tracking your emotional stability and the things that come up is a really good practice to go back on into and see the contrast as you're moving forward through, say, a 90-day journey. And the dependency, Karina, you kind of touched on that, is I think people could get dependent on it when their mindset is, this is the replacement for the wine, the cigarettes, the other numbing agents that, humans take. That really could get into that more of the dependent stage, where it's like, I'm just going to take this every day because I'm going to feel better. And I don't want to do any of that other stuff, So again, perspective.
My question about that is, who isn't dependent on something?
Exactly.
And what does that even mean, dependency, right?
Yeah.
And what about harm reduction? Yeah. These are all big questions and big topics of conversation. One of the classes I teach at an integrative medical school is actually called the Integrative Treatment of Addictions. And one of the major conversations in the field of addictions and recovery is harm reduction, is how every single human being is addicted in one form or another to something, which is different from dependency. I depend on human interaction. I depend on this air and the water that I drink. And, what's just an open-ended question. What's the problem? Yeah, what's wrong with a dependency? Why is there a reason, or why is there a desire to avoid it? What's the fear of being dependent? These are some of the questions that can actually be fielded and processed with an integration specialist or a therapist, or somebody who's going to be assisting somebody who's looking to explore with microdosing or with macrodosing with psychedelics. So the way I tend to approach that question is, again, on a one-by-one individualized basis, and to, pose it as an inquiry. Well, what is something being replaced, and is that less harmful? Is that actually a benefit? Is there harm reduction there? Is there a fear around dependency because, okay, if I can't get this particular substance, then I won't feel good, and I really want to feel good. Okay, well, then the conversation is around, what is it to feel good, and what's actually driving the desire to stay in a particular feeling state all the time. Because as humans, we're supposed to experience a broad spectrum of emotions. We're not supposed to just stay stuck in one particular state. That would be really, really
Boring.
and how could we adapt to life as it happens? It would be pretty inappropriate in certain circumstances as well, right? So inviting a deeper conversation around that, I think. It's not the simplest answer.
It really isn't. I like the way you frame that with, we're all dependent on something. One thing that we say at Medicine Box is that we're all recovering from something as well. And it doesn't, that recovery is one of our pillars, and that really stems from my own recovery with drugs and alcohol. But we're recovering from capitalism and that 9-to-5 job that we didn't like, or relationship, or physical ailments, or chronic, Instagram, Facebook use, whatever it is. And this question I really want to drill into a little bit more. And I'm going to combine both of them because I know there's a lot of, it might help with some of the questions that people dropped in the Q&A. You touched on it a little bit already, Karina, but are there any drug interactions that people should be aware of? And then, as a follow-up question to that, what sorts of research would you like to see come out of the universities like Johns Hopkins and some of the leading universities that are looking at this, specific compound?
Yeah. So first of all, I would love to see more research because I'm fascinated in the ways that science is constantly sort of able to concretize and conceptualize and showcase what has often been anecdotal or passed on, generation to generation. A lot of ancestral wisdom, some of the ancient practices of yoga and acupuncture, and working with psychedelic plant medicines is just beginning to be understood, because as science evolves and as technology evolves, there are more methods for testing. There's also the quantum scientific model, which we finally have, thank you, Albert Einstein, which accounts for invisible forces. So thank goodness. And it's fascinating. It's just another way to sort of conceptualize or see or try to make sense or understand or create meaning. And of course, just understanding that it's a constant flow, a constant journey, and that we're always going to be evolving and discovering more. I don't like to get stuck in any particular discipline. There are pitfalls to all of them, and there are benefits to all of them. And it's important to understand what all of those are so that there isn't some aggrandizement or worship of some kind of woo-woo hearsay, or of some new scientific study that says this is how things are, until the next one comes out that says, oh wait, it's different. So there's got to be a happy medium. So I am very excited about some of the resurgence in psychedelic research, which can just provide a little bit more insight into how we human beings work in terms of our physicality, in terms of our energetics. We are energetic beings. We're electric. EKGs measure our electrical output. And there seems to be a, just one of my favorite topics is epigenetics, neuroplasticity, the ways in which we can access innate qualities within ourselves. I believe that a human being is a pretty complete pharmacy. Of course, we're in interaction with other environmental factors and substances and beings to that effect, but we contain so much of what we need to truly heal ourselves. And when that can be better understood and better showcased, because some people will trust their intuition on that, and some people will need hard, cold facts that are published in a, peer-reviewed scientific journal, double-blind placebo studies, and they will believe nothing else. And then there's everybody in between. So the more information there is, and the more sort of opportunity to digest some of the complexities of being a human being, the better, in my opinion. Again, not everybody will agree with that. And I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I think everybody's entitled to, to their own opinion. There's room for all of them, and we need dissenting voices. We need people with very different points of view. Your other question about specific drug interactions, again, due to limited research, because these substances have been, made criminal and illegal, not enough research exists, which is one of the major sort of arguments for legalizing them, at least medicalizing, so that there can be greater safety. Now, there's experimental and anecdotal evidence around, as well as a little bit of research, very limited research that has been done in terms of the serotonergic pathways, which I've already talked about. That's just one of the many things that happens, but it's been one of the more studied in terms of psychedelics. MAOI, which are also a class of antidepressants, which create a condition where there is too much serotonin in the body, which can be a life-threatening condition. Certain antipsychotic medications. There are even certain hypertensive medications that can interact. I believe there is besides independent studies that can be looked up, I believe there are now some guides online that sort of chart and catalog the various interactive qualities. I could probably go into a little bit more depth right now, but I don't know if we have the time to do so. But that can be researched. I know it's out there, and I know more research needs to be done to populate those charts with more accurate information. But the one I would definitely watch out for is MAOIs. I would advise being at least 2 weeks clean off of those. SSRIs, if you want a more maximal effect from psychedelics, it's best to also be off of those for a minimum of 2 weeks. Those are the more general common medications to sort of look at.
I love the interconnectedness and the synchronicity, because Linnea, I think I said her name right, Linnea, asked about that. How long should I be off of an SSRI? Other people asked about MAOIs and SSRIs. Andy Clark, you touched on that. So just really trying to be mindful of time and get some of the questions addressed in some of your answers already. So thanks for that. My favorite here, and one thing that Medicine Box is all about, is equal parts medicine and mentorship, and what the benefits of mentorship is and are. Karina touched a lot on that with, having a friend around, or a facilitator, or even a therapist, or a psychedelic integrator, or even someone that has gone through the process for years, like myself here, or, the hard experience, boots on the ground experience like Dr. Karina. But the benefits of getting mentorship and guidance for this work, and if you're going to do it at all, let's speak to some of those benefits versus doing it yourself, because there are a lot of questions, and some of these questions that y'all are putting up are just mind-blowing to me, because your awareness is showing and your curiosity is peaked to better yourself, and the right questions to ask before going into a dedicated practice like this. But I will always say that 100% having a mentor or a guide or a coach or a practitioner, or whatever word you want to use, is the best route possible, because questions do come up, especially when you're unearthing old traumas or new thought patterns or new emotions. You talked about the neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity in layman terms really is just that window of opportunity that the mushroom opens up in your mind. It's malleable, and when you're more malleable, you're more open-minded to make those shifts in your life. So sometimes having that, or most of the time having that mentor or guide to really show you that perspective in that window of opportunity to make the shift, that's when you start going into that like really deep healing.
Right. So a few things about having supports. Like you just mentioned, Brian, that there's a possibility for deepening. First of all, one thing that's true about human beings is we evolve and learn the most through relationships. Take any person who has been deprived of human relationships in their life. Their cognitive abilities, their emotional capacity, the ability of themselves to regulate their own nervous system are highly, highly diminished. When doing any kind of inquiry, any kind of journey into the self, for the purposes of personal growth and development, to have a trusted other who can serve as a template for our projections, as somebody to bounce things off of, as somebody to hold a safe and sacred space, is monumental, especially when going into mysteries, into the unknown, which is where psychedelics take us. They take us to places that that are new and different for us. So it's like scuba diving, but having the little cord tethered to your diving buddy up in the boat. There's a sense of safety and resourcing that allows you to do that allows someone to do a deeper dive. So that's one reason, or one benefit. Now, I'm not a shooter. I don't want people to shit on themselves, and I don't want to shit on anybody. So I don't say, you got to do it this way. To each his own. And there is a way in which working, with a shaman, with an integration therapist, with a guide, can really enhance the value from the experience. That's probably the most beneficial sort of outcome of working with somebody, is that there's a greater depth and a greater kind of return on investment, if I can use those very modern capitalist terms, in terms of the journey experience. There was this other thought I had about how, in terms of neuroplasticity, this analogy of maybe, being in a corner or kind of being up against the wall. And sometimes it helps if somebody's there and they say, hey, look up just a little bit, there's a window there. Or look just to your right or your left, there's a door. And when you feel, really stuck in that corner and all you see is the wall in front of you and there's no way out, it might take a little bit of a prompting from somebody to say, hey, just back up and maybe zoom out a little bit. And look, there are other options, there are other possibilities. This is what the medicine itself actually enables. It enables access to other parts of the brain and other types of connections between the neurons that give us that felt sense of possibility. It translates into a perception of options. So that's kind of part of the way that the plants work, and that's part of the benefit and the sort of guidance that can be received from a supportive third party, as well as the safety and